When my parents forced me to do all the housework while my siblings did nothing, they thought I would just accept it forever. They never imagined I would walk out and leave them drowning in their own mess. But when the house spiraled into complete chaos, their desperate calls started flooding in, begging me to come back. What they didn't realize was, I wasn't their maid anymore, and I had no intention of saving them. My name is Rachel, I'm 20 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been treated like the household servant. I have 2 younger siblings, Ethan, 17, and Madison, 14, who have never lifted a finger in their lives. While they sat around scrolling through their phones or playing video games, I was the one cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, and keeping the house from falling apart. And my parents? They never saw a problem with it. You're the oldest, Rachel. You should be setting an example. It's not a big deal. Stop acting so dramatic. You live here rent-free. The least you can do is help out. They never asked Ethan or Madison to do chores. They never cared that I was working a full-time job while doing everything at home. But then one night, everything changed. I had just finished a brutal 9-hour shift. My feet aching, my stomach growling because I hadn't eaten all day. All I wanted was to sit down for 5 minutes. But the moment I walked through the door, I was hit with the familiar smell of leftover food. And then I saw it. Ethan's dirty plate, crumbs everywhere. Left right in the middle of the coffee table. I clenched my jaw. I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me. And then, from the kitchen, I heard the words that would change everything. Rachel, come clean the table. Ethan left his plate again. Something inside me snapped. I was done. And what happened next? Let's just say my family had no idea what was coming. I stared at the dirty plate sitting on the coffee table. It wasn't just the crumbs, the half-eaten food, or the sight of Ethan lounging on the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. It was the fact that this was my life, every single day. I clenched my fists, trying to breathe through the frustration building inside me. But before I could even process my emotions, my mom's voice cut through the air like nails on a chalkboard. Rachel, come clean the table. Ethan left his plate again. I froze. It wasn't even a request. It was a command. She didn't even look up from whatever she was doing. No hesitation, no second thought. Just the same expectation that had been drilled into me for years. I turned my head slowly. Mom, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I just got home from a 9-hour shift. Ethan can clean up after himself. She sighed, already irritated. Rachel, don't start. You're the oldest. You should be setting an example. That was it. The final straw. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Setting an example? For who? For Ethan, who never gets asked to do a damn thing. For Madison, who can't even lift a finger to throw her laundry in the hamper. I work, I clean, I do everything in this house while they sit around doing nothing. And you want me to set an example? For what? How to be a doormat? The room fell silent. For the first time in a long time, my mom actually looked at me, really looked at me, like she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. But instead of understanding, I saw something else in her eyes. Defensiveness. Rachel, you're being dramatic, she scoffed. It's just a plate. Stop overreacting. I felt the heat rise in my chest. It's not just a plate, I snapped. It's years of you treating me like a maid. It's years of watching Ethan and Madison get away with everything while I pick up the slack. It's you never once acknowledging how hard I work. It's you never once thanking me. It's you never treating me like I matter. I could feel my heart racing. My hands were shaking. My dad, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. His voice was firm, authoritative, the voice I had grown up fearing. Rachel, stop this nonsense. You're an adult now. You don't get to complain about helping around the house. I turned to him, my eyes burning with anger. If I'm an adult, then why do you still treat me like a servant? That was when Ethan, who had been watching this whole thing like it was a TV show, finally decided to chime in. He leaned back on the couch, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at his lips. Geez, Rachel, chill out. It's not that serious. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I felt my vision blur with fury. I had spent years sacrificing my time, my energy, my mental health, just to keep this house running, just to keep everyone happy. And they still didn't care. That's when I realized something. They were never going to care. No matter how much I did, no matter how much I gave, they would always expect more. I felt something inside me click into place. I was done. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to leave. I turned on my heel and walked straight toward my room. My mom called after me. Something about, "Stop being so dramatic, Rachel." But I wasn't listening. I grabbed a duffel bag and started shoving clothes inside. I heard footsteps behind me. "What do you think you're doing?" My dad's voice was sharp now, like he could sense he was losing control. I didn't stop. "I'm leaving," I said simply. That one sentence made the air shift. "Rachel, don't be ridiculous," my mom said, stepping into my doorway. "Where are you even going to go? You can't afford to live on your own." I turned to face them, finally feeling the weight of every year I had spent trying to please them lift off my shoulders. "You think I haven't been planning this?" I said, my voice steady. "You think I haven't been saving every paycheck, waiting for the moment I had enough to leave? Well, congratulations, Mom and Dad. That moment is now." Ethan scoffed from the hallway. "Whatever. You'll be back in a week." I zipped up my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked right past him. "No, Ethan," I said without looking back. "I won't." I grabbed my keys. I walked to the front door. My mom called my name. My dad demanded I stop, but I didn't look back. I walked out, got in my car and started the engine. And as I pulled out of the driveway, leaving them behind, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. I was finally free. Before I share what happened next, when my family realized just how much they had depended on me and started begging me to come back, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been taken for granted like this? Have you ever had to make a hard decision to walk away? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe that knowing your worth is the key to happiness, hit that like button because this next part is about to get even crazier. The first night in my new apartment was eerily quiet. No dishes clattering in the sink. No distant shouting from my parents. No demands being thrown my way the moment I walked through the door. Just silence. For the first time in years, I could sit down and breathe. No one was expecting me to get up and start cooking. No one was waiting for me to clean up after them. I could finally exist without being someone else's servant. But that peace didn't last long. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from my mother. "Rachel, we need to talk. The house is a mess, and your father is getting really frustrated. Please just call me back." I stared at the screen, shaking my head. Less than 24 hours and they were already struggling. I deleted the voicemail without responding. By the end of the day, there were 3 more, each one growing more frantic than the last. "Rachel, your siblings won't listen. No one's helping with the cleaning, and I don't have time to do everything myself. Just come back for a little while. Rachel, this is getting out of hand. Your father is upset. The house is falling apart. You're being unreasonable. Rachel, don't do this to us. We need you. Just come home." The manipulation was almost laughable. They weren't worried about me. They weren't calling to check if I was okay. They just wanted me back to do the chores. I didn't answer. Then the text started. First, it was Ethan. "Mom says you need to stop being selfish and come back. The house is disgusting." Then Madison. "Rachel, you left all your stuff here. Are you coming to get it or not? Also, can you do your laundry when you come? Mom says it's piling up." I almost laughed out loud. They still didn't get it. I ignored the messages. The next day, my dad called. His voice was tight, controlled, the way it always was when he was trying not to sound angry. "Rachel, this is ridiculous. Your mother is exhausted. The house is a disaster, and your siblings aren't helping. You need to come home and take responsibility. Take responsibility." I gritted my teeth, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. They still saw this as my problem. They still thought I owed them something. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice before I answered. "No, Dad, I don't need to do anything. You need to start parenting your kids." Silence. Then a sharp exhale. Rachel, we raised you, we provided for you, and this is how you repay us? By abandoning your family? I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. No, Dad. I'm just finally putting myself first. I hung up before he could say anything else. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. For years, my entire existence had revolved around making life easier for my family. Now that I was gone, they were finally feeling the weight of everything I had carried. And they couldn't handle it. The calls didn't stop. My mom tried a different approach, guilt. Rachel, please just come home for a few days. Your father isn't doing well. He's stressed, and I don't know how much more of this he can take. Rachel, do you even care about us anymore? You're breaking this family apart. I sighed, rubbing my temples. They weren't asking me to come home because they missed me. They weren't asking because they loved me. They were asking because they needed me to fix their mess. But I wasn't their fixer anymore. A week passed. Then two. I got used to my new life, work, gym, Netflix, quiet nights in my own space. I could breathe. I could relax. I could exist without being weighed down by expectations. Then one evening, my phone rang again. This time, it was Ethan. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear what he had to say. What do you want, Ethan? I asked, already exhausted by the conversation I knew was coming. You're seriously not gonna come back? Like at all? No. Wow. So you just don't care? You're letting Mom and Dad struggle while you're off playing house in some tiny apartment. I clenched my jaw. I care, Ethan. But I care about myself more. You're 17. You're not a child. You can do your own dishes. He scoffed. You're unbelievable. You're just proving Mom right. You're selfish. I let out a bitter laugh. Selfish? No, Ethan. I was selfish every time I let you guys treat me like a maid. Every time I put your comfort over my own sanity. But I'm done with that. If that makes me selfish, fine. I can live with that. I hung up. It was the first time in my life that I didn't feel guilty for putting myself first. But my family wasn't done with me yet. The next day, my mom left another voicemail. This one was different. Her voice was shaking. Rachel, your father isn't handling this well. He's stressed and the house is just come home, please. We'll talk. We'll work something out. I stared at my phone. For a moment, I almost felt something. But then I remembered every time they dismissed me. Every time they made me feel like my exhaustion didn't matter. Every time they expected me to clean up after them without a second thought. I wasn't falling for it. I didn't respond. A few days later, they would try one last time. And this time, they would finally realize the truth. I wasn't coming back. Another few days passed in silence. For the first time since I left, my phone wasn't constantly buzzing with desperate calls and guilt-tripping messages. The quiet should have been comforting, but I knew better. My family wasn't the type to give up easily. Then, on a Thursday evening, just as I was settling into the couch with a cup of tea, my phone lit up. Mom calling. I let it ring. A minute later, a voicemail popped up. I stared at it for a moment before finally pressing play. Her voice was different this time. Not just desperate, angry. Rachel, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this has gone on long enough. We have done everything for you and you've repaid us by abandoning your family. Your father is at his breaking point. I hope you realize how much you've hurt us. This is your last chance. Come home. Otherwise, don't bother calling us again. I exhaled slowly, pressing my phone against my palm. So that was it. The final play. It was no longer about asking me to help. It was an ultimatum. Come back or be cut off. For a split second, I felt something tighten in my chest. This was the moment where, years ago, I would have caved. I would have apologized, promised to do better, and gone back to cleaning up after them like nothing had happened. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had been living on my own for almost a month now. I had built a life where I could wake up without feeling resentment, where I could walk into my home and not feel used. I wasn't giving that up. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. 20 minutes later, I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house looked the same, but as I stepped out of my car, I could already feel the difference. This wasn't home. Not anymore. I knocked once, then pushed open the door without waiting. The smell hit me first. Stale air, unwashed dishes, trash that hadn't been taken out in days. The house felt tense, like the walls themselves had absorbed the stress of my absence. My parents were in the kitchen. Ethan was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Madison sat at the dining table looking up with a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Mom's face lit up the second she saw me, as if she thought I had finally come to my senses. "Rachel, you're back?" Dad stood up, nodding like I had finally done the right thing. "It's about time. Now let's put this nonsense behind us." No, I interrupted. The room froze. I took a slow step forward, letting my gaze drift over the messy counters, the sink overflowing with plates, the laundry piled in the corner. "You wanted me to come back? Fine. But not to clean." Mom frowned, shifting uncomfortably. "Rachel, this is your home. We all need to contribute." I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that made Ethan glance up from his phone. "No, Mom. What you mean is I need to contribute. Because you never made them do anything. Because it was easier to dump everything on me instead of actually parenting them." Madison scoffed. "Why are you being so dramatic? It's not like it was that hard." I turned to her, my jaw tightening. "If it wasn't that hard, then why haven't you done it since I left?" She didn't have an answer. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "Rachel, we're tired of this attitude. We're your family. Families help each other." I nodded, pretending to consider his words. "You're right. Families do help each other. So where was my help when I was working full-time and coming home to clean up after everyone? Where was my help when I was exhausted, crying in my room because I felt like I didn't matter to any of you?" Silence. Ethan let out an exaggerated sigh, tossing his phone onto the couch. "Oh my God, Rachel. Are you seriously still talking about this? Just grow up and move on." I turned to him, my voice ice cold. "You first." For the first time, he actually looked uncomfortable. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I didn't come here to argue. I came here to say goodbye." Mom's face fell. Dad stiffened. Madison's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Mom whispered. I looked around the house one last time, the place I had spent years trying to make a home, only to realize that home wasn't a place. It was how you were treated. "I mean, I'm done," I said, voice steady. "I'm done being your maid. I'm done being the only one who takes responsibility. I'm done feeling like I have to earn the bare minimum of respect from my own family." I could see the words sinking in, could see the shock on their faces as they finally realized I wasn't bluffing. "Rachel," Mom started, reaching for my hand, "please, we can fix this. Just stay for a little while." I pulled back. "No, Mom. You don't want to fix anything. You just want things to go back to the way they were. But I won't be part of that anymore." Dad clenched his jaw, his voice cold. "So that's it? You're just walking away from your family?" I met his gaze without flinching. "No, Dad. You walked away from me years ago. You just never noticed." And with that, I turned and walked out the door. No one followed me. I got into my car, my hands shaking slightly as I gripped the steering wheel. But it wasn't from fear. It was relief. I was free. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone make me feel that small again. And as I drove away from that house, away from the years of exhaustion and resentment, I finally felt like I was heading somewhere that truly felt like home. Not a place, but a life that was truly mine. The biggest lesson from this story: knowing your worth changes everything. For years, Rachel gave everything to a family that never appreciated her. But the truth is, respect isn't something you should have to beg for. Sometimes, people only realize your value when you stop letting them take advantage of you. So ask yourself, are you being valued, or are you just being used? Now, I want to hear from you. Was Rachel right to leave? Comment 2 if you agree with her decision, or 7 if you think she should have stayed. Let's start the conversation. And if this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe to Mr.HeartVibes for more stories that remind us all to stand up for ourselves and never settle for less. Fire.